Hello, everyone. My name is Wes Asmal. Welcome to another episode of Tooways to Skin a Cat, a show where we talk career experiences, entrepreneurship, and investments. The main aim is to show that there's more than one way to be successful other than just climbing the corporate ladder. Now we are live on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the show will be available on podcast by tomorrow. For those who are listening on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please leave a rating for the podcast. Now, if you're joining us live, drop a one in the comments so that we know we're not talking to ourselves, and drop a two in the comments if you're watching the recording. My guest for this week is Mothathe Sewelo. She's a chartered accountant who is the head of banking sales and a director of various organizations focusing on social inclusion. She's a social inclusion advocate. Mothathe, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Let's jump straight in. Tell us your story. Where do you come from? And maybe even outside of work, who is Mothathe Sewelo? Give us a backstory.
Thanks. So Mothathe Sewelo is a simple young lady from Attridgeville, a township in Pretoria. I come from a family of four, from a loving family, along with extended family. I was raised with my older brothers, just the two of us. And really, I was raised to be a person who dreams big. I knew from my upbringing that I always wanted to do big things with my life. I always wanted to live in a double story. I always wanted to help others. And I mean, it's a small thing, right? It's like, oh, double story. But when you come from a township and you don't see much of that, you kind of, it's something that you aspire towards. I just always knew and I was taught that education would be my way out. And I was always a smart person in high school and varsity. So it was just about, applying myself. And when I grew up and I qualified as a chartered accountant, I got a lot of exposure and I realized that, these things are not, they don't just happen. We have to be intentional about them. And you have to always look at your journey and see what was really difficult for you, what could have been easier, and go back into those environments and try and help the younger you, right? You wouldn't really, I won't, I won't really resonate with problems that a male would experience, but I will resonate with problems that a female that looks like me, that comes from my own background, would experience. So that is really what has made me so passionate about being a social inclusion advocate. I've realized that I've had opportunities from the support of my family. I was a bursary student for PwC. They took me up while I was still in high school, and they gave me an amazing experience. They taught us from basics like cutlery. Where do you put your cutlery? How do you sit? How do you conduct yourself in meetings? And that was while I was still in high school. And you go into the articles and you're taught further. There's that intentionality in how you are trained. And now in my current role where I am supervising other people and I'm a leader for other people, I always think about if a person did not get that kind of training. It's a small pool of people that go through the articles and that kind of intentional training, but there are thousands, millions of graduates, and you ask yourself, how would they know how to behave, how to do things, how to position themselves if they're not taught some of these things? So at the heart of myself, I always think, how would somebody know? And how do I make sure that the opportunities that I have gotten, I can also make them possible for others so that they see that these are possible. Like I have lived abroad. After my articles, I became a manager and I got an amazing opportunity to live in America and work in America. And that's something that a lot of people can't say they've done, but it's not brain surgery. You can really do it if you set your mind to it. So I just try to make sure that those opportunities are accessible to other people, that other people also, when they see me, they can know that it's possible for them and they can find a way. I feel like I'm approachable. I always make sure that I'm available so that I can share in some of the experiences I've had and even the rooms that I've been in. I've always tried to think, how does another person get an equal opportunity to be in these rooms? And one of the biggest passion projects of mine was co-founding a seat at the table. And it came about through my mentorship with Ms. Trifosa Ramano, who's highly passionate about young people and women. And being mentored so intentionally also made me feel like, how do we make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to be mentored like this? Everyone gets opportunity to be in rooms with affluent people that look and sound like them so that they can really clean on that and learn from them and see that it's possible. So yeah, I think, in summary of who I am after going on for a while is to say that I really am a chartered accountant by profession, but a social inclusion advocate by passion.
Okay. Banking seems to be a very specialized career. It feels like once you're in, do you get the opportunity to change careers, or is it okay? Once you start in banking, you've been there for a while. That's where you're going to end up.
Banking is a really exciting space. And I think that for me, I joined banking after I left the US. I had returned after getting an amazing opportunity to stay on permanently. I felt the need to come back to my own country to build, to be part of the solution. We want change. We want to see our country grow. We know we have the potential, we have the resources. We just need the right kind of leadership and we need people to invest in our country, right? Ourselves, we need to invest in our country first. So I came back, and when I was reflecting on what I wanted to do, financial services was something that really stood out for me because being somebody who is always thinking about how to help others, you think about key sectors in the economy, and financial services is one of those, right? The impact it has in people's lives, in just making sure that people understand financial literacy, that they understand they're empowered, and banks play that pivotal role, especially as organizations that represent trust. So I joined the banking space in the finance role. And I mean, that was like the easiest way to move from audit to finance because I'm a chartered accountant and that is where the skill is sought after. But I've always wanted to be somebody who is client facing. I love solutioning. I love solving problems. So it naturally, I moved through the bank. And, working in the banking industry is such an exciting thing. You have corporate banking, you have retail banking. I had at one point moved into credit risk, and now I'm more in front office where we're solutioning for clients directly. When you're in that space, I don't see how you get out under 5 years because there is just so much to do. I mean, I've been in various roles for a couple of years and I still feel like I could have done them for longer. I still feel like there's so much more to learn because there is so many parts of the bank. It really appeals to anyone, whether you're more quiet in the back, you want to be a programmer. There's systems, there's regulations, there's money to be made, there's compliance, because it's a highly regulated space, so it's very high pressure, but it has impact. When I look at the work I do, I'm so proud that there's an underlying company and an underlying family that benefits because I have solutioned for a client. I have provided them with a working capital facility that enables their business to go on and make sure that they're able to put food on the table. Because for me, the importance of why I'm doing things is that it must answer to my why. I'm always looking to say, how do you empower somebody else? And I think it's something that I always try to challenge everyone to say, it doesn't matter which role you do. You must always understand who it touches, who's the ultimate person that it touches. Yes, you see it as, especially if you're doing business to business transactions, it seems like it's corporate, but there are people at underlying in those corporates, and there are people benefiting because you work somewhere, your family benefits, your spouse, your kids, because you work at a certain place. So I think for me, banking is just such an exciting place. It's a place that I would deem quite difficult to leave because, as you grow as a professional, you want to deepen in some sort of speciality so that you're able to be in rooms where you're advising and where your opinion is valued. And to do that, you have to walk the hard miles and you have to walk the journey and make sure that you stay in the spaces so you can absorb the knowledge and become an expert. So yeah, I think, it's quite difficult. Some people leave and they go to other banks, because I think once you're in the space, you just get absorbed and you move in between the banks. Some people leave altogether, maybe it's not for them. But I think that a lot of people that join the financial services sector usually stay until the end of their careers.
Okay, that makes sense. Some may say that, I don't know, banking is probably the height of capitalism, whereas some will say social inclusion is probably the complete opposite. How do you marry the two?
I think, ultimately, it's about the fact that if you see all of our banks, and specifically the bank that I work for, we speak a lot about how your story matters and being an African bank and Africanacity. And ultimately, at the core of what we are doing is enabling businesses and people, right? And you know, as a person, you know that you work, you expect to earn something, right? So it would be unfair to expect that corporates would just operate on a non-profit basis, all corporates, right? But I think that, when you are in the space, you realize that when we're solutioning, we're very focused on the client, right? We're looking at the client, what they need, how do we make their lives better, and how are we a banking partner they feel like they have a partner in, right? You can look at a bank from the outside and say, oh, they're just taking our money, XYZ. But ultimately, you live in a home, it's probably financed and it's capacitated by a bank. Cars, the economy, even corporates needing loans to build big businesses, to scale up, to create jobs. So banks ultimately are that partner that make sure that these things are possible. But you have to be realistic. I work for a bank and I expect a salary at the end of the month. And the only way we can get that salary is to make sure that we are pricing and we're charging our clients. But at the core of what we do is making sure that we treat our customers fairly. That is a big thing for any financial services professional, to know that you have to put the customer first, you have to put their rights first, you have to make sure you're protecting them, you're protecting their information. So I think, yeah, that is what makes those to marry somehow, because when you're doing the work you realize how at the heart of it is that customer, and that besides the model, the revenue model, ultimately banks are trying to solution for clients on the ground.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. For the audience, we will be responding to questions towards the end. So if you have any questions, please add them to the comment section now so that we don't miss them. Now, I see you've been a director of a few non-profit organizations. Now, most obviously, the intention is to give back, but has being a director of a non-profit, has that helped your career in any way? Have you learned anything new from those experiences?
Definitely. I think one of the key things that I've been taught from a couple of mentors of mine is the power of volunteering, right? As a young person, you want opportunities, you want to be on boards, you want to speak on panels, you want all these things, but you don't yet have the depth and the knowledge that it takes to take some of these things and the positions that come with these. So one of the things that I was taught was volunteer your time. I've volunteered my time at various institutions, and one of the key things I wanted to learn was to be a non-executive director. And when I was engaging with some of my mentors, they were like, volunteer there. You have a skill set, you're a chartered accountant, you understand governance, you understand audit, financial reporting, and the likes, and you're a financial services professional. So why don't you volunteer all of those skills to a company that will benefit from it, even though they can't yet pay you? So I got involved in nonprofit organizations, and I won't lie to anyone, they're quite time consuming because ultimately they need the help, right? And you spend a lot of time helping, probably beyond just being a non-executive director, because they rely on your expertise. So you help a lot, depending on the level of sophistication of the organization. But you find yourself in the trenches learning a lot about financial systems and the likes. So I think for me, that was what was quite critical, was learning all of those. It's kind of like building your own business, because MPOs also work like corporates, right? They just don't charge profit, but they are still sustainable organizations, and you need to make sure that there's income, the expenses, and everything balances ultimately, and it's a compliant organization. Governance is a very big thing in terms of being a non-executive director, and I think that from my experience being in these organizations, being a director from in these organizations, you also get an opportunity to learn from more experienced directors, and that is something that money can't buy, right? So sometimes you feel like, okay, I'm not getting paid, but the point is for you to learn, and you're also giving back. The organizations that I'm involved in, one is drug rehabilitation. That's very key to the youth. There are a lot of youth that's left behind due to drug abuse. And what are we doing about it? It's not always about, okay, going to the soup kitchen. There are many ways you can help to capacitate organizations doing the work that you might not have capacity to do, or work that doesn't resonate with you. But being on a board of such organizations also help you to give back, because when those organizations are sustainable, then also those people continue to receive the help that they need. And I'm also part of organizations that look at social cohesion. It's quite a key thing um, in our country, looking at our history. It's a lot of work that is not deemed as important, but is very critical, because with the history we have, when I'm part of Colisa, that's some of the programs that they come up with to say, how do we help in society to make sure that we are taking care of people? There are programs for people that come from prisons. This is work that's very critical on the ground, because people go to prison, people go get involved in drugs. Also part of I'm a co-opted member in GBV Fund. You're part of organizations that are solution everyday problems that you wouldn't necessarily have the scope to be part of assisting if you were just trying to go and help in the organization directly. But yeah, I think the biggest learnings have also been from establishing a seat at the table. When you build up your own thing, you start to learn from governance frameworks. We do a lot of board training for some of the members we have, and you start to learn that sometimes you want things too prematurely, and it's quite critical as a young person to interrogate yourself to say, do I have the necessary skills to take a seat at the table? We all want a seat at the table. We all say, yes, me, elect me, I can do it. Yes, we have the attitude, we have the energy, but we also need to understand that in those positions, you're taking on a lot of responsibility, and therefore it's quite critical that you are trained, you are knowledgeable in governance issues. One of my mentors also emphasizes all of that, because governance is key. If without governance, there's no organization that will thrive. So yeah, I think that was what made me also be part of these organizations, the organizations that resonated with me as somebody who is about not leaving others behind. That is what social inclusion is about, but also making sure that I'm learning the skills I need so that I can be a leader that is effective in the future.
Makes a lot of sense, and that gives people something to think about. I want to shift focus a little bit from nonprofits away to something a little bit different. So I was looking through your profile, and I noticed that you spent 2 years marking for UNISA. I remember once upon a time applying for that role and not getting in. But was that a beneficial role for you?
It really was. I think part of me there's always been somebody that would have loved to be a teacher, and help young people, because I believe that everyone is intelligent, is smart, but we don't all learn the same. And I've always felt like somewhere in my distant future, I would like to be in academia. So it kind of gave me a sense of what that looks like and what students struggle with. And it was really such a great experience for me to see, the same subject I struggled with, I used to mark for audit. And I mean, you know how auditing is. It's like very technical, and you have to say the right words. They highlight them. You have to use the right verbiage. It's not like finance where you can wing it and be like, but the answer makes sense. In audit, it's like, we are checking an engagement letter. Does it have everything an engagement letter must have? And you pass or you fail. And I think that it was also like such a great experience to be able to connect with audit as a profession, as a professional, because you see what it's trying to do. When you're studying, you feel like you have to remember the terms, you have to remember, regurgitate the textbook. But when you actually go through audit articles and you're trained, you realize this is why we're doing what we're doing and the value of some of the procedures. And you also see the challenges of young people. I mean, some people have not great handwritings, and as a marker, you have to have the patience and the passion to help people by actually going through their script, recognizing when you're maybe too tired, and also reading them again and trying to find the words and trying. You're on the student side, you kind of saying, have they found those marks? Can you find those marks? So yeah, I think it was really a great experience. It is not an easy gig to get into. I also was kind of lucky to get it, but it was quite great to learn from young people that I don't even know, they don't know me, but learning and reading their scripts and how they interpret the same question is always so mind blowing.
Okay, okay. Now, I mean, you've done this process in your career where you've gone into banking. You've also set up when you've been a or you are a non-executive director on a few organizations. Let's say somebody's trying to emulate you. They also want to give back. Um, they want to follow in your footsteps. Where should they start to avoid maybe running into the same stumbling blocks that you ran into?
I think the first thing where they should start is to be part of a seat at the table. Sorry, I just need to plug in before I die. Joining a seat at the table is quite key. That was an organization that, can you see? We're good.
Yes,
Apologies, my laptop was dying.
it happens. Don't
But
worry.
one of the key things I would say is joining a seat at the table. They can join us on LinkedIn, our page. They can also join our Instagram page. We have an X page and we also have a website, but they can get all that information on our LinkedIn page. And this is just a platform that was created to equip young people, to give them access to preeminent people that have succeeded and that have walked the journey so they can learn from them. There are also various initiatives we have there where we're trying to equip young people, and part of that is the board mastery program, where we're trying to make sure that young people really understand the responsibility of being on boards, and also are equipped from an educational perspective, and they understand all of the governance regulations, and just being a director that is efficient. So that is one of the key things. There are multiple organizations. I mean, as a chartered accountant, as a female chartered accountant, I'm part of AWCA as well. That is a place where you can go and volunteer if that's what you're passionate about. There's the likes of ABSIP for professionals that are in the financial services spaces. But what is key in all of these organizations is to volunteer. People register as members and they come, and you try to get to them, but you can't get to somebody in one instance, right? In one seating. Um, so it's important that you're an active member, and part of being an active member is volunteering, because that's where you learn. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm scared of talking. How did you get to talking like this? How did you get to being able to run things? And it's coming from training, right? You get trained in these organizations, you get people that are accomplished, that are also part of these organizations, that are guiding you, that are mentoring you. Sometimes people want to be mentored and they want to take time from very busy people, right? But if you find something that you can help that person with, then as you're engaging with them and helping them with that item, you also learning from them, because they're human. They will talk about life, they will share their experiences. So I always encourage young people to say, look for the loopholes. People are always like, oh, whoever's too busy, whoever. But those busy people also need help. So the best way to get into their diaries is to help, is to say, hey, I saw you looking at this specific topic, I've prepared a paper for you, maybe we can go through it. Because once you have added value to them, they also, then you freed up some time for them to add value to you. So I would say that please join these organizations. We welcome you as well at a seat at the table. We are a global organization, and because we realize that there are so many people across the globe that might have the solution to the same problem you're experiencing it, because maybe they have overcome it. And it's important that we create a platform where young people can connect to say, oh, I'm dealing with the specific climate issue. Maybe let me talk to a seat at the table member in New York to find out how they're doing that. And it should be somebody that's reachable, somebody that you've engaged with in the various initiatives that we have. So it's just about being part of the solution, not always feeling overwhelmed by a problem, but saying, what is the little thing that I can do to solve this issue? You find grads and they feel like, oh, I don't have anything to offer. I don't I don't know anything. And I'm like, but you work at a bank. There are how many other grads that don't work at a bank? Why don't you share that information? Because that's information you have. You are being mentored by X, Y, and Z. Why don't you share those resources? Why don't you say to me, let's have a breakfast with my friends and you can share with them because I've helped you. Why don't you share that same resource with other people? So it's just always about saying, what about somebody else? If you're getting something, how does somebody get the same thing? And it's not about helping a million people, but it's about your immediate circle. How are you plugging your immediate circle? How
Mm.
are you saying, I have access to something? Do my friends have the same access to the same thing if they want it? Do my family, do my cousins, do you go back? Do you share? So people always feel like you need to be a CEO or an exec, but I think that I've come to the realization that in our little pockets, we all hold power, we all hold influence, we're all exposed to something that somebody else is not exposed to. So we need to share.
There were so many golden nuggets in that last answer that I'm not even going to try and summarize it. If you didn't get it, rewind it and listen to it again. That I think is the great way for the show to end. The show has been live on YouTube and should be available on podcast by tomorrow. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast and you feel that it's added value, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on that notification bell to get automatically notified when the next episode comes out. Mothathe, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me on this show. It's been a pleasure.